Now, at the same time, you were doing a different function, which also has sort of an interesting character. I was surprised when you told me about this, that the EO officer in the institution, in the prison, was basically, his job was to defend the organization against charges of discrimination. I somehow had the impression that the EEO officer was there for the benefit of the employee, to help them when there was a possibility that there had been some sort of discrimination, but I guess really it was for the benefit of the institution, not necessarily, or maybe it was both ways, I don't know. But here you were sort of put in more of a, sounds like, an advocacy position, not advocacy for the employee, but advocacy for the institution, defending against charges of discrimination. So
Baruch,
what was that about?
You probably have more experience with the civil rights systems in our country than I do. But
I may know.
Okay, we'll find out. But when I was trained, I went in there with just knowing the general sense of the civil rights laws, and so the state trained me. I went to Columbus and trained with everybody else, and regular updates. But essentially, people in state employ would file a discrimination case with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. Civil Rights Commission would take a look at it. If it had merit, then they would do a bit of investigation, and then they would make the charge. And we would have to look at the charge, and we would have to write a response.
We meaning the EEO people in the prison, in the organization.
You keep saying prison, but it was a hospital. So
hospital, I'm sorry.
That's all right. You're forgiven. These were patients.
Right.
Yes, we were trained to respond to the charge.
Okay.
That means we were saying, well, you're saying this, but my investigation says that. So, who comes up with the truth, I don't know. But then also this, and this, and this. Based on that, we deny the charges in so many words.
I see.
So, the result...
So you were in effect attorney for the defense?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. The result was that none of these cases were upheld.
You were a good attorney for the defense.
Apparently, I was a good attorney for the defense. At one time, I looked at the situation. I said, well, there's no merit to it, but in fact, since he's filed this, he's already been promoted, into another position, and that's what he was actually asking for in the charge. It's like, hey, we already gave him what he wanted, so why don't we just, not deny the charge, but just accept it and go on our way. And I was basically verbally reprimanded for that stance. You don't admit anything.
Well, we teach them that in law school.
So I told you knew something about this.
Well, I just wasn't sure which side you're supposed to be on, that's all.
So there it was. Too bad, because it lent itself to being acknowledging that maybe something happened here that felt awful to you. So anyway, I learned my lesson, and then I went to the staff and I said, look, folks, if you sense or if you feel like you've been discriminated against, I'm inviting you to bring your concerns to me and see if I can work with you and the other folks that you're complaining about or making this charge against, and see if we can understand what happened and work something out to everybody's satisfaction, and then go on our ways, rather than get in this stance where we have to defend and charge and so forth. And if we can't work something out the way I'm suggesting, then you can still file the charge, and we'll go on about our business that way. And as a result,
so this was something which nobody told you to do.
It just made sense to me.
It made sense to you.
It just made sense to me.
In your position.
In my position, because we were in this together, weren't we? As a hospital, we were all working towards helping the patients. Why would we be discriminating against each other when maybe that was naive, but I had worked with the staff. I had colleagues that we learned how to work together, and we learned to talk to each other and listen to each other, no matter what level we were on. And so here I'm in a position where I'm defending, no, we didn't do anything wrong. Well, maybe somebody did.
Right.
Maybe somebody did something awful, and maybe they did it inadvertently, or maybe you misunderstood, or who knows? That it goes on.
But it's interesting because what you really, anybody again who's a mediator who's listening to this, watching this, immediately says to themselves, "Wow, well, so what Wahlrab did there was he changed a kind of advocacy position." Which was the natural definition of your position in the EEO part, distinct from EAP, to a kind of mediator position, an in-house or at least mediative position, because you might have to later on become a defender. But in the meantime, everything you're saying, let's see if we can sit down, let's hear what everybody has to say. That was like becoming an in-house mediator for discrimination cases. Yeah.
And the word mediator wasn't
part of the vocabulary.
Wasn't part of the vocabulary, which just astounds me today, because it was in the world. I mean, it was in our society.
Yeah. This was when already? This was in
84.
84. Yeah, it was, but I would say not that prominently in 84.
Then I'm excused for not having noticed it. It's like, wow. Because 4 years later, I was taking a class to be a volunteer mediator.
That's right.
4 years later, but it wasn't there then, and I had no clue how to do it.
So you were doing this without you were walking the tightrope without a net.
Flying by the seat of my pants is another way of saying it. And I don't know that I did very well, but no more charges were filed during my tenure.
So let me ask you this question, as sort of pushing you a little bit. So at the very same time you're doing these two jobs. Now the EAP job, if I want to, again, I'm sort of importing language from our mediation framework, especially the transformative framework, into this ARC discussion. In the EAP position, you are kind of adopting this supportive philosophy, outlook, capacity-based way of working, helping people to sort of recognize where they are and then figure out how to be more effective in what they're doing. That's what you're doing over there. You're not diagnostic in the EAP part. It's not like somebody comes to you and you say, well, I think you should do this, this, and this.
Right.
I'm assuming you didn't work
No. That's
you
right.
were helping them to find out where they might have some shortcomings, where they might have capacities, and so over here and that had been what you did also in the team leader position before you shifted to this.
Very similar.
Now you come into this mediative role, and the question I have, I'm not sure I ever heard from you about this, is and maybe you can't remember, how did you do that? Were you a quote-unquote problem solver? So people came in and you said, well, look, I think I see what's going on here, and if you do this differently and you do this differently, I think this will work out.
I may have been a problem solver, but not in that way.
Okay.
I didn't want to tell people based on any supposition on my part what their problem was or what was going on or what happened. I recall at one particular one, which I won't go into details, somebody was being called names and it was derogatory, and it was sexist, and it created a hostile environment, and
so that would have been a hard one to defend.
That would, it probably would have been a hard one to defend. I knew that she felt bad about it. I know it felt disrespectful. I could put the disrespectful name on it, but I wasn't a woman. I couldn't relate to that at the level that I needed to understand what she needed to do or what harm was caused or what she needed for the remedy. So it was, to me, it was clear. I couldn't go in there and say, well, this is what you need to do, or this is how you need to talk to the person, and so forth and so on. I just couldn't do that. So I understood that in my limited relationship with this woman, I couldn't explain her. Mm-hmm. I couldn't talk for her, and I couldn't tell her what she needed to do. All I could do is set up an environment where she could speak for herself and the other person could listen. And I did not bring them together in the same room. Mm-hmm. So I did convey information back and forth. Mm-hmm. I could, so I did that. So I didn't know how to do the bringing together, mm-hmm. but I did try to speak for, tell me what and I did my best to say it in her same words. And the aha moment comes on the other person's part, mm-hmm. and this is what I was trying to do, and it's like, well, if she could just understand that, something may be different in her reaction. Right. And so I did my best to carry that over. And it worked back and forth until they decided this is what they were going to do.
Why did you not put them in the same room, just out of curiosity?
I didn't know I didn't have the understanding.
You didn't know that could happen?
I didn't know that could happen. Honestly, duh. It really is amazing to me today.
That never occurred to you?
That never occurred to me, right. but I didn't do it.
Well,
and it's scary. It's probably a scary thing to think that you put them together. Whoa.
That's correct. And we were talking about that before. Not that Tom Wahlrab is afraid of doing scary things.
Right. But that sounded pretty bad.
But when you're unfamiliar with it, and it seems, and there's another way to do it, so that might have something to do with it. I think it is scary to put people together and not know exactly what might happen. So it's a safer way to do it. But it is, you were then, even though your role really had nothing to do with mediation, nobody ever told you anything about that, but your disposition, your inclination was to handle these disagreements in a way that didn't involve, sort of naturally letting it go into the adversarial process. And then playing your role out, which you were apparently very good at, in denying the charges and making that denial stick. So you took this other thing. Now, so these two things were going on at the same time. The other thing that strikes me about how you describe the EAP complaint process is sort of assuming that, if somebody's making a charge, they're probably not making it up out of whole cloth. There's probably something there. People don't just make up things for no reason. And on the other hand, probably everybody would prefer to do something about this that doesn't lead to sort of further escalation of an accuse-defend posture, right? So those are sort of assumptions based upon your I was going to say assumptions based on assumptions. Those are attitudes based on your assumptions of who these people are, both the complainer and the supposed perpetrator of discrimination.
Right.
And it's like, I'm inclined to sort of think that this is probably not a situation of intentional injury and or imagined victimization. But that probably these are both people who have a certain amount of reasonableness and a certain amount of concern or respect for each other. And if that's true, then why shouldn't we try to access those capacities and not jump into the adversary?
Also, I would add that it wasn't necessarily my assumption that it wasn't intentional discrimination or it wasn't real victimization, but given that that's possible, give them an option of doing it another way.
Right.
So that's the only way I would change what you said. I don't know if that exactly changes, but I didn't even assume that level. But I still wanted to offer the option.
And that's based upon the assumption that, look, this could be a situation.
There you go. That's right. It could be.
This could be a situation where there's a misunderstanding.
Right.
Let me give folks an opportunity to sort of step up to the plate And the assumptions there, I'm sort of reaching forward, but the assumptions there about who these people are and what their dispositions are relate to the idea that that people are reasonable and capable and also considerate of one another.
Right, that's right.
Otherwise, I wouldn't bother
Right.
with another step. Let's just take it to the boxing ring
Right.
and have it out. So it's interesting to see those sort of impulses or ideas surfacing again the way they had before at different levels throughout this arc so far. Now it's interesting. Okay, well, so here you're kind of quasi-mediator at the hospital. And all of a sudden, not much later than that, you all of a sudden find your way to the Dayton Mediation Center as a volunteer. Was that because you saw some connection, or that was just like, again, a kind of an accidental serendipitous thing?